like you mentioned, like your family, and I know that one of the things that you're looking to discuss today was like your family now that after I think you shared with me with the ending of a relationship. So why don't you take us through the beginning? Like, how was that relationship, and ultimately, why did it end?
Well, the relationship that we're talking about, the one that I left sort of a year and a half ago, the one that turned abusive, actually wasn't my husband. My husband, the father of my children, was actually somebody that I met in Poland when I lived in Poland. So when I lived in Poland for about 18 years, it was with him I got married. We bought a flat and we had two boys. And then when the marriage kind of broke up, he stayed in Poland, but I moved to England, where I began a new relationship with an English man. Um, and that is the relationship that I left a year and a half ago. That's the relationship that turned quite abusive. He's a toxic person. He's 100% a narcissistic person, and I brought my older son with me to England to go to college, while my younger son stayed in Poland with my ex-husband. He goes to private school out there. So my son and I were living in this abusive relationship. And it's one of these situations where, I had a lot, as you can sort of see, I have a lot of education behind me. Have a lot of life experience behind me. I had a whole marriage behind me. And then you meet these people who are just so good at sort of getting you to fall in love with an illusion. And you don't until you meet a narcissistic personality, you're not prepared for a narcissistic personality. I had truly never met anyone like him before, and I was utterly unprepared for the reality of being in a relationship with a toxic personality. So I got a crash course, unfortunately.
How did you think that impacted your life looking back on the situation?
Terribly, horribly. When I ended it, and it's a surprise that I did end it, because most of these relationships end with the narcissist kind of getting everything they need from you in terms of supply or attention or positive energy or negative attention, whatever it is they want from you. And once they kind of have sucked you dry and drained you, they scan around for the next source of supply, which is what they need to keep themselves going. And then once they have that secured, they discard you. They kind of throw you on the rubbish heap and they're off merrily in a new relationship. But I'm the one who ended things with him. And part of me still can't quite believe it, because it felt like the most impossible thing in the world to do was end this relationship. And that's the side of emotional and psychological abuse, more so than physical, that people don't talk about, is how it completely demolishes you as a person. How someone like me, with all of my accomplishments and all of my travels and all of my professional successes, was within just a couple of years completely destroyed by this person who said they loved me. And it just changes you completely as a person. And even after I left, I found the strength and I walked away and I took my son and we moved cities and we started from zero. And I'm reclaiming my writing and I'm starting a new business and I'm making friends and so on and so on. I am not the person that I was before in terms of my lightheartedness or my sense of I don't trust people as easily as I used to. I used to be very open to new experiences and people, and now I'm a little bit more whoa, 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 you know. And I think that anybody who leaves an abusive relationship, I think these are the permanent results of that abusive relationship. And you can move beyond them, and you can get a lot of yourself back. But I think that when you've been completely demoralized and destroyed as a person by someone who says they love you, I think it's a really long recovery process. And I know I'm still in recovery now, even though I think I'm doing actually very, very well. So this is the kind of thing that can change you for good. It really can.
I think some people neglect that, right? Like they think like once they break up, they can just move on, right? Like some people, when they break up, they're like, okay, Johnny, who's been messaging me all this time, I'm gonna go over to his
Mm,
house because they say the best way to get over someone is to get under someone, right? Jokingly, of
mm,
course. I'm not saying that for people to do that, but I know that people do, right? Like people say that, okay, my bedroom is cold because I'm not with this person anymore. Let me go warm it up in ways that are very unhealthy. And I think taking the time to understand how this relationship has impacted you, not only maybe financially, maybe not mentally, but emotionally as well, right? Because regardless of how bad it became, there's probably a point in the relationship where both parties actually loved each other, or
mm.
they may have had strong enough feelings. And then for people to move on so quickly and then just push it on the other person saying that, okay, you know what, all the issues was that person's fault. I challenge that sometimes and ask the person, okay, as bad as it was, I know I've been in emotionally manipulative, abusive relationships. There's a point where I look back on some of those relationships and I said, aha, that was the indicator. That was the fork in the road that I could have said, I think maybe I need a pivot and step
Mhm.
away from this, or at least do a check in with the person, or I can continue down that path. Do you think a lot of people have that same mentality where when they're in a reflective perspective now, they can look back and say, okay, this is when something didn't seem right, but I maybe didn't hone in on it, or maybe I ignored it altogether?
Oh, for sure. And I think this is one of the things that's quite unique about narcissistic abuse, is that it, in the beginning, this person is your dream partner. And there's a reason for this. It's called the love bombing stage of the narcissistic abuse cycle, where they absolutely have to make you fall in love with them. And what they do is something called mirroring. So if you say, "Oh, my dream idea of a vacation is to go to Greece," they'll say, "Oh my God, my dream vacation place is Greece too. That's so amazing. Oh my God." And if you say, "I really prefer red wine to white wine," "Oh, no way. Yeah, I love red wine too." And then, "I'd love to have two kids." "Oh my God, two kids. Yeah, two is my perfect number." And suddenly you find yourself thinking, "I am so in sync with this person. Like, I have never met someone where everything lines up so much." And in hindsight, knowing what I know now, which was that that was all fake to kind of suck me in and get me where he wanted me, um, there is nobody on the planet that you are 100% in sync with. This person doesn't exist. The only person you're 100% in sync with is you. So, in a strange way, it's like you kind of fall in love with yourself because this person is reflecting back the best of you, all your desires, your dreams, your accomplishments, your wants, your fantasies. And suddenly you're all you can think is, this is just so meant to be. And then they start to say stuff like, "This really feels destined. Like, this really feels like, the stars are all aligned, and I finally found you, and I've been looking for you my entire life." And again, in retrospect, looking back on it, that's another red flag, because that's um, giving the relationship a status and intimacy that has been rushed. And it's been rushed because they haven't told you the truth about themselves. They've told you the truth about you because everything you've said they've agreed with, but you don't actually know anything about them, not really. And so, um, in with narcissists, everything's sort of on fast forward, everything's rushed. I mean, it's not unusual to hear they'll tell you they love you in the first week or two after meeting you, or they want to move in with you immediately, or they want to get you pregnant like now. Let's just, and you're so swept up in this whole, oh, I've met my soulmate, that you find yourself agreeing to the rush. And there's also this fear that if I let them get away, I'm never going to meet anybody this in sync with me ever again. So the whole beginning of the relationship is such a whirlwind. And what I can honestly tell people is, and I'm a romance writer. This is what I do, is I write romance. Um, I know it can seem attractive to think, oh, star-crossed lovers, and oh, this is so amazing, and oh, my soulmate. But in real life, true, healthy, legitimate, honest relationships take time to grow and develop. You get to know each other over time, and you see each other in different settings, and you have different opinions on things, different likes, different dreams, different preferences, and all these things are healthy and normal. If you've met somebody who's like the carbon copy of you, and they're pushing you and they're saying they love you immediately, this is such a warning sign, but it's not one that gets talked about a lot, because I think this whole um, pushing the big romance thing is especially pushed on women. Like, I think we as women, not so much the generation, like I'm 53, so I was still raised on the whole generational belief that um, your soulmate is out there, and true love is a fairy tale, and the great loves and the great romances, those movies of the 80s and 90s, the big declaration. And you don't fall in love with a big declaration, you fall in love with a bunch of little day-to-day things about a person. And so if you're with somebody who is rushing you, big declaration, claims you're fated, take a step back and just slow things down. And that is something that I have learned the hard way, because the whole thing is, once you're totally in love with them, and once you've moved in with them, and in my case I brought my son, I got on the plane, I moved countries, and I came here for him, I brought my son. Well, now they've got you where they want you, so now they can start to be who they truly are, which is where we call the unmasking of the narcissist. The mask starts to slip, and you start to see the true person behind this perfect facade they have created for you. But now there's no need to keep up the facade, because, well, you know, they've got you. They've got you. And this is where things start to change as well.
Sometimes when I speak to women specifically about their relationships and when they've been either in a narcissistic relationship or maybe a codependent one, many times they will share that the person told them exactly what they wanted to hear their entire life, because they went their entire life without ever hearing it. So they would say things like, you know what, you're very attractive, you're very beautiful, all these things that a lot of people would want to hear, because maybe growing up they were told that they're ugly, they were told that they're dumb, they were told all these things that were maybe negative in tone and negative in context. But now they
Mm.
have someone who they find attractive enough that is telling them everything they wanted to hear. And then they begin to realize that they kind of attracted this person because they wanted someone to treat them well. And when you mention the romance part, I can just imagine some of these guys using it as like a playbook to seduce some of these women, right? Saying that, okay, women want to be treated this way. They want to hear this. They want to hear that. In your experiences, not only maybe on a personal level, but in your work, do
Mhm.
you find that to be true where there's people out there that they have such a desire for attention and validation, that they find it in so many of the wrong places.
Well, it's kind of interesting because if we're talking about the narcissist, they're the one who actually needs validation. They're the one who's actually really empty inside as a person, and they don't like themselves, and they're not strong people, and um, they they only feel good about themselves if they can make someone fall in love with them. It's the strangest sort of headspace that they occupy, where they only feel valued and validated if somebody's in love with them. The problem, the the sort of narcissistic collapse begins in their head because they know that they've made someone fall in love with something that's not real. So, on the one hand, they feel validated because this person totally adores me. But on the other hand, they're thinking, I don't feel good at all because they don't adore me at all. They adore this person I've pretended to be. And this is where they start to devalue the partner because they think it's like there's a point where it flips in their head, and they don't think, I feel so good that this person's so in love with me. What they think is, this person's so stupid to have fallen in love with me. And I was faking the whole thing. I was, like you said, I was telling them what they wanted to hear. I mean, I just agreed with every single stupid thing that came out of their mouth, and they fell in love with me. This person's an idiot. So then they start to devalue you. And that's sort of the second phase of the narcissistic abuse cycle. From love bombing to devaluation is a very short trip, but it's a meaningful switch as well. But if we're talking about my romance writing, because I write romance and it's contemporary romance, and it's something that when I kind of got out of this relationship and I was thinking, because I stopped writing while I was in the relationship. First of all, he completely sabotaged me having any independent money or income. Financial abuse is part and parcel of, I think, all kinds of abuse, especially narcissistic abuse. So when I finally left, and I was thinking, like, do I want to start writing romance again? Because I haven't done it for a while and I've lost a lot of my core audience. And besides, I don't really believe in love anymore. Like, this relationship has really kind of screwed it up for me. Um, and then when I decided to start doing it again, I decided that I enjoyed it and I like writing romance, and it's how I really express myself. And I do still believe in love, and I do still believe in honest, open communication in relationships. And I do still believe in people wanting to be open and transparent with each other. So I thought, okay, I'll go back to romance writing. So then I got asked a few hard questions about that. And I thought they were very good questions. I was on a few podcasts, and the hosts were saying, well, after having been through what you've been through, how can you, in good conscience, sort of contribute to this whole fairy tale romance thing that you're now saying is part of the love bombing thing? And I thought that was a really fair question. But my answer is that I don't write that kind of romance. I write really, like, hard, realistic romance. My couples don't just meet and fall in love and it's star-crossed and everything's perfect. They work really hard to become partners, and they work really hard on communication and mutual respect and bringing their baggage to the relationship and setting it down in front of the person and saying, this is me, and being open and honest about it. And I've written 32 books, and every single relationship in every one of those 32 books, not one is the traditional Disney fairy tale thing. Not one. Every couple that I've ever written has really, their relationship is hard won. They've worked at it, they've earned it. And because I write series, like books 1 to 5, or a couple of series, or books 1 to 8, you see the couple from book one all the way through to book eight. So you actually see their relationship develop and grow, and there's conflict, and there are things to be overcome. So you actually are part of the relationship from beginning to end. So it's not like you see them in one book and they meet and they figure it out and they get the happy ending at the end. No, you'll see in the next book that they have trouble getting pregnant, and this causes problems in the relationship. Or you see that one of them is injured in some way, and there's some life-changing physical things they have to work through. So you see the relationship up and down, and crisis and comfort. And so I can honestly say, like, hand on heart, as a woman who's been through an abusive romantic relationship, I don't write abusive romantic relationships, although I know a lot of romance. There is that kind of genre of romance, that trope. I don't write it. I don't have time for it. I don't believe in it. And I can honestly say, again, hand on heart, that I do not contribute to this whole it's written in the stars that we are meant to be. And it doesn't matter what you think. Uh, I've met you. I met you yesterday. I love you today. The end. I've never done that. So, yeah, so I can honestly say that my the romance I've been writing, because I've been writing for 10 years. I was writing romance before I even met this guy. So it's never been the kind of romance that I fell for at the beginning of my relationship. But the relationship sort of brought up that whole romance that I was raised as a child on the fairy tales and the Disney movies and the princesses and the damsels in distress. But that's not what I write at all. And I'm not interested in writing it, and I won't write it because
So let
I
me ask
don't think
you,
it's healthy. I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's
I
realistic.
agree. I 100% agree. And the reason why I agree is I think it sets expectations on both people that are very unrealistic because imagine a world where you're walking, you leave your house, right? If we're going to base it on that fantasy, that the romance in Disney, you get out of your house and the person you see, you look at them, they look at you, and you guys fall in love.
And the
And you're
music, and
and the
there's always
music,
music. Ah,
right?
yeah,
Exactly
yeah.
right. So you're falling in love with an avatar of the person because how many of us, when we leave our house, we're like, okay, this is the version of Train I want to present to the world, not the version that's in my house, or this is the version of Marysol, not the version in your house, right? So when you now in yours because you went through what you went through, you write about
Excuse
romance,
me.
and I know so many people who use their artistic outlet as a form of like therapy. So
Mm-hmm.
now for you, when you're writing something that is very different from your lived experience, is that you now understanding what was lacking in your previous relationships and making sure that it shows up in another form of your life, this way creativity?
No, not at all. You might think so, but I was writing about really hard things, emotional things, long before I met this guy and long before I experienced any kind of abuse, because I had never experienced abuse before this man. Like I said early in our talk, I was utterly unprepared for this man because I had been in relationships that didn't work out, obviously, but it wasn't because anyone cheated or it wasn't because anyone hurt anybody. It was just because things had run their course. Or in my case, I was getting on a plane and moving to China. Like he was staying in Canada, I was going to China. Clearly, this, but every relationship, right down to my marriage, my ex husband, um, was respectful, and everybody got a chance to be heard, and everybody got their airtime, and nobody felt like disrespected or trashed or thrown on the heap. And so I had, before this man, I had a very, very healthy history of emotional relationships. I'm not saying I had a great life. Like, I had cancer as a child, I had cancer again as a young mother. Um, I experienced, I mean, hardships. My parents got divorced, Um, so it's not like I escaped life unscathed, but nothing like this guy at all in terms of relationships. So although my writing I've always been interested in contemporary hard topics, taking two people from different places and bringing them together to show that if you're willing to compromise and communicate and work, you can have a healthy relationship with someone just because they're not like you or they've been through something. So I've always loved to write that. And I continue to write that since leaving this relationship. I can honestly say, when I look at the first book I ever wrote, not my best book, obviously, because it was the first book I ever wrote, but I think about sort of the thread and the themes and how I approached the relationship growing between these two people. I've changed nothing. Like I said, I've changed since this relationship because I feel it's changed me in some pretty permanent ways, but it actually hasn't changed my writing. It hasn't changed my work. And I was afraid it might, but it hasn't. And in fact, when I write my characters now, I think I root for them just that little bit harder because I really want them to make this work and get it together. But I want to make sure before they do, they truly know who they are themselves, but also who this other person is. I want to make sure that my characters know each other honestly and then go into this relationship making an informed decision. Because with my ex, I was in a 6 year relationship with him. And I can honestly tell you, I never knew him. I don't know who that guy was. I know the guy that I saw at the end was the real him, but I was with a total stranger for years before I figured out who this guy actually is. And that's terrifying to contemplate. And I think you'll hear that from a lot of people who have been abused, where they say, I look back on it now, I have no idea who that guy was that I was sleeping with, that I was claiming to love, that I brought a child into the situation that, I was working with. Like, I don't even know who this guy was. Everything was such a fiction to get me where he wanted me that I don't know who this guy is. And the worst part about narcissists is that they don't actually know who they are either. That's the whole point. They are nobody. Like they have no fixed center of any kind. So they become somebody different with every new victim, with every new partner. And what you said about moving on quickly, well, I mean, I'm in recovery from this disaster. This is the whole thing about narcissistic abuse is the narcissist should be the one in therapy, but they drive everybody else into therapy and they never go. I mean, I ended things with him. It'll be like it'll be 2 years in July, but he had basically moved in with somebody by September. I mean, September, I was still reeling, you know, and he had already started a whole new relationship within like just 6 weeks. So 6 years with me, and 6 weeks after I ended it, and he was on his hands and knees and he was begging and he was crying and he would do anything and he went to therapy, like the whole thing. And I said, no, he was already with somebody new and they're engaged. They got engaged within, I think, 5 months of them getting together. So this is the other thing about the narcissist is they absolutely cannot be alone. They cannot, first of all, reflect on their behavior because they don't look good. But secondly, they can't be alone with themselves because as people, they are so empty. They need to be validated from outside, not from within. So this is why they will move on as quickly as they do. It's not loneliness. It's the complete inability to sit with themselves ever. So it's like what you said about my bed is cold and something. This isn't rebound. This is how they move from relationship to relationship. They have to go to somebody new who hasn't figured them out yet. And they start the whole love bombing cycle all over again, making somebody fall in love with them, which is why they will suddenly start dressing differently. Suddenly they want different things. They have new favorites, they have new preferences because they have to mirror the new person, whoever that is. So the person that you knew, really is a mystery because now they're a completely different person for the new victim. And that's why they move on as quickly as they do. And that's why the victims of narcissists do not move on quickly because we're so completely shattered as people.
Let me ask you, Marisol, then, if you, for the most part, had healthy examples or healthy enough examples of relationships previous to this, and then your experiences as on a professional level were healthy, why do you think then you got caught up with this relationship, which seems to be the outlier in comparison to the other ones?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that I asked myself because I thought, what? First of all, I thought, how stupid am I? Like, what did I do so wrong? And then the second thing I thought was, what was so wrong with me that it attracted this guy into my life? And this is why people who have been through abuse um, don't jump into a whole new thing, is because we're left feeling like we did something wrong or we are somehow wrong, like we brought this on ourselves somehow. And in a strange way, when you're someone who is highly educated and well traveled and professionally successful, there's another layer of shame to it because you think, how could I mean, my whole life I've been in control, I've made good choices, I've had my eyes open. What was so wrong with me with this relationship? Like, how could I have been so stupid? I'm not a stupid person, but clearly I'm a stupid person. um, and I think this is something that I've had to learn over the past year and a half since leaving him, which is that narcissists, a certain type of narcissist will actually look for a very high value target. They don't want a woman who's already broken down, or a woman who's financially struggling, or a woman who is reeling from a bad relationship. They don't want these women because there's no challenge in breaking down somebody who's already broken down. What they want is the woman who is independent, smart, successful, confident, assertive, you know, because it's two reasons. First of all, she looks great on his arm. Like, if he can land a woman like that, then wow, he's really something, isn't he? Like, to make a woman like this fall in love with me, wow. And it puffs up his ego, doesn't it? But the second thing is, when the devaluation stage starts, they get legitimately, such a sick pleasure out of taking this woman who was all of these things and breaking her down piece by piece by piece, like reducing her, devaluing her. And devaluing a woman like me, which my ex did. I mean, he completely broke me down. He had me completely dependent on him. He had me questioning my own eyes, my own experiences. Like, he would say something, I would call him on it. He would deny having said it. And I would say, you said it 7 seconds ago. And then he would say, I think you need to go get some therapy. I think there's something wrong with you. um, I think you're losing your mind. I think you're really getting sick. Like, I'm really worried about you. And this happens often enough over years. Keeping in mind, this is somebody who was your dream partner in the beginning, who says they love you. And then after a while, honestly, you start to think, is there something wrong with me? Like, am I remembering it wrong? Did I make that up? Like, did I see that? Did I hear that? Did I experience that? Really? Because why would he? I mean, why would he tell me that I have this so wrong? Like, why would somebody who loves me, who treats me so well sometimes, who just wants to help me, why would they lie to me consistently about this, right? Um, and then you start to, and this is one of the big red flags, is you start to um, you don't trust yourself. You trust them more than you trust yourself. which makes no sense. So I don't think that anybody who has been targeted, because you are targeted by a predator, which is what these people are. I mean, my ex was a predator who found me, and I ticked a lot of boxes for him. And I made him look good. I mean, in the beginning, he couldn't boast about me enough. He couldn't he just couldn't say enough great things about me. I made him look so good. But then as the mask began to slip, um, then the game changes, and then the game becomes about, now how do I start breaking her down? Like, how do I start making her dependent on me? How do I start making her question her own experience? How do I make her question her reality? How do I make her choose me over herself? Like, and that's the game, and that is the devastating part of the relationship. It's the time when you stop trusting yourself. And, you know, there's nothing that I did to attract that except to be something attractive to a predator. And there was nothing I did to deserve that. And there was nothing I couldn't see it coming because I'd never experienced it. But let me tell you, if I ever see it coming again, I'll get the hell out of there, because now I know what I'm looking for. But it's like that I said, that's the problem. You don't know you're dealing with a narcissist until you've already dealt with a narcissist. And nobody walks away from a narcissist unscathed. So you have to go through this horrible, horrible experience before you know what the experience looks like. And I don't wish it on anybody, except a narcissist. I'd love for them to meet another narcissist, but I don't know how that would go actually.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like people, they sometimes, and I've heard this like in other interviews that I've done, is that they would think that their pedigree, their social status, would shield them from being abused, being gaslit,
No.
being manipulated, being from the narcissist, from the abuser, right? And they don't realize that a lot of people who are narcissists, they're not going to really go after someone that isn't going to benefit them on a financial and social level, right? Like they're the
Yeah.
type of people that they want to extract as much of your resources, time, and energy from you. Like I know someone just through conversation through a couple of women that I spoke to, and he's definitely that way, right? Like he'll get people to pay for flights, he'll get them to buy computer chairs, he'll get them to edit videos for him, like all these things, right? And you look at the women, and there's like two, three women, and you look at them and you're like, hey, do you realize you're doing this?
Yeah.
And then what they do is they kind of look at you and you can see in their mind, they're starting to process, right? But they're so deep in it that they
Yeah.
get rid of you instead of taking themselves out of it. Like, why do you think some people choose to stay in it despite them coming to the realization they're like, oh, okay, you know what? This is going on, but I'm going to stay in it. And sometimes they stay in it for another year, 2 years,
Oh God.
five
Yeah.
years, right? Like, why
Yeah.
do you think some
Yeah.
people stay even though others are saying that, hey, how come you don't see this?
Well, the thing is, you do see it. The problem is, it goes straight back to how the relationship began, which was this amazing, incredible person from the beginning. And you think this is who they really are because they can sustain and maintain this persona for months and months and months. They will they will carry it out for as long as it takes to get you where they want you to be. So, in your mind, this is who they are. This is your soulmate. This is the person you've fallen in love with. So, you believe this is who this person is. So, when you see the mask start to slip, you see the cracks, you see things that, like, this person, like I remember the first thing I noticed about him was something happened, and it's so minor I can't even remember what it was, but his reaction to this minor thing was so out of proportion. Like, it was so huge, it was a massive reaction to a minor problem. And I remember looking at him thinking, like, what on earth, because he'd always come across as so easygoing and so understanding and so patient. And then suddenly he had this thing. But you see these, and this, you start to see these things, and a big reaction to something minor is a big sign of narcissism because they can't stand to not be in control. So if something challenges their control or threatens that, it's called narcissistic rage. They just lose it. So I saw this rage, but it didn't make sense in the bigger picture of this person that he had been for a year, right? So then there's this, you think it's a blip, you think it's a weird thing. And the truth is, we all have bad days, right? We all get tired. We don't feel well. It's like we get exhausted, and then there's that one little thing, and we just blow, right? So, this is what I thought that was. He was starting his own business at the time. It was really stressful. And I thought I had just seen him on a bad day. Because the thing is, after this, they put the mask right back on and they go back to being and so then you think it's an anomaly. You think, yeah, that was weird, but I mean, it's not who he is. That's just, yeah, he was having a bad day. But then it happens again. There's the next slip of the mask, the next thing that happens, or you something he says or does something inappropriate, so you go and talk to him because you're like, well, this person loves me and trusts me, and we're open and we're in a relationship, and I'm going to go and talk to him. And his reaction is that you're criticizing him and you're saying, no, I want to have a conversation, I'm trying to communicate. Oh, really? Well, how come I'm always the one in the wrong? You're so perfect, you think you're so perfect. Well, what about the time you did this? And suddenly they're throwing something in your face, and then suddenly you're on the defensive in a conversation. You went to have an adult conversation with the man you're in a relationship with, and suddenly you're on the back foot defending something that happened a year before that you had no idea even upset him at the time, but now he's bringing it up. And suddenly that's what you're talking about. So then that starts to happen. And then um, you notice that they set the mood and the tone in the room. You notice that depending on how they're doing that day, you're doing that same way. So if they come into the house and they've had a horrible day, well, you're on eggshells. But if they come in and everything's great, then you're happy. And you start to realize that every time you try to bring up an issue with them, it turns into a nuclear grade argument. So you stop bringing things up. And then you realize the only time you have good days with this person anymore is when you shut the hell up. You don't say anything. You don't have an opinion contrary to theirs. You don't bring up an issue. You don't call them on anything. You don't push back. And what you need to understand is this doesn't happen over a couple of weeks. This happens over years. It's like small chips. So I think one of the big red flags that never gets talked about enough in abuse, it's not always what the other person does, it's what we do. Like, we stop bringing up hard topics because we're afraid of our partner's reaction. We stop expressing our opinion that's contrary to theirs because all we're going to be told is, oh, I guess you're the smart one and I'm just dumb and my opinion's wrong and I can never do anything right. um, if they come home in a terrible mood, you don't challenge them and say, look, don't take it out on me because no, you fawn, and you try to, I'll make you a cup of tea, and oh, do you want a back rub, and do you want to talk about it, because you're trying so hard to manage their emotions, right? um, and you stop telling people what's happening in the relationship. Like you mentioned, when people say, why are you with them? Well, you stop talking to people about what's happening because the reaction you're going to get is, well, why are you with him? And at some point you're thinking, I don't know how to not be with him. And the worst part is, the person from the beginning, you're convinced, is still who they actually are. And you have done something so wrong that you've made that person from the beginning disappear. You've let the side down. It's your fault. They've turned into this raging megalomaniac kind of thing. And if you could just talk to them in the right tone, if you could just approach them in the right way with the right words, if you could just broach the subject with the right opening sentence, like you go into every conversation like you're preparing for court. This is something else that happens. This is another red flag. If you have to prepare a conversation about, please, could you stop throwing the socks under the sofa? Could you put them in the hamper? If you have to approach that like you're going before the Supreme Court of Canada, um, then this is a problem, right? But um, you stop telling anybody what's going on, because there is a part of you that when you start to say it out loud, you hear it. And then the person says to you, well, why the hell do you put up with it? And you're like, well, because in the beginning, because don't forget, at the beginning of the relationship, you told everybody on the planet what a great guy this was, how perfect he was for you, what he did for you. And now you're going to go back to these same people and say, you know what? I think he's a monster. Like, I actually think he's trying to break me down and drive me crazy. And you come across as crazy. Like, you sound like there's something wrong with you. And they say to you, well, we haven't seen that side of him. He's a great guy. Like, what are you doing wrong to provoke him? Like, what are you doing to bring around this kind of side of him that nobody else sees? So, a big red flag in ourselves as victims of abuse is we stop talking about we stop talking, full stop. We don't talk to our partner because we can't talk to them without provoking them. So we shut ourselves up, and we can't talk to our friends because they're either going to say, oh, no, no, I mean, we've never seen that side of him, or worse, they're going to say, well, like, what's your problem? Why don't you leave? And it's complicated to try to leave. It's really hard because by that point you're so enmeshed, and the financial dependence is, it's terrifying. The whole thought of picking up and leaving, especially when you had a kid, the way I did. And I was in a country where I'm not from England. My family's all back in Canada. All my friends are in Canada and in Poland. And here I was in England. I arrived just before lockdown as well. So I really had no support systems. I had nothing except him. And what, I'm going to walk away from this guy? Like, and the worst part is that, they know when they've pushed it too far. A narcissist is really, really smart that way. They know when they've pushed you to the point where you're actually leaving. You're not just thinking about it, or threatening, or you're crying or whatever. You are actually seriously going, something is very wrong in this relationship and I have to get out. Well, guess what? That is when the guy from the beginning of the relationship, that perfect guy, he comes back. And suddenly, it's like it sucks you back in and gives you hope. And you think to yourself, okay, I'm not crazy. This is who he really is. Like, this guy from the beginning, I'm not just imagining him. Here he is. So you stick around because he's back. And he'll be back for a few days. My ex could go a couple of weeks being the guy from the beginning, and then slowly the mask starts to come down because now you've stayed, right? Like, you were out the door, but now you're still here. So now it's safe to go back to being who he really is. And also, by not leaving, they see that as you giving them permission to go back to the way things were. Because if it were, and this is what narcissists will say, if I'm that bad, why don't you leave? And there's no answer to that because you're thinking, well, that's true. So I guess it's not that bad, or it is that bad, but I can't leave. So then you're caught in quite a horrible situation, really. And the worst part is that you have lost all confidence in yourself. And it takes so much energy to leave an abusive relationship, and you have none because you're so drained trying to manage your adult partner's emotions. You've stopped managing your own. You don't even know what you feel most of the time because what you feel is what they feel, and is whatever they're feeling, that's where you are too. And the only way to keep them in a good mood is for you to say nothing. Like, no, never, 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 never step out of line. So you shut yourself up. And that is why you stop talking altogether. And that is really hard. Once you leave the narcissistic or abusive toxic relationship, it's just really hard to express yourself freely without fear, because you've gone without saying, no, I don't like that, for so long that it's really hard to just say to someone, even just as a friend afterwards, like, oh, I know I don't really want to go do that. Because you think, oh God, no, explosion. And then your friend says, okay, that's cool. Well, let's try this instead. And you're like, that's a healthy response to a difference of opinion, not, nuclear war. So it is one of those things where it's easy to get, if we're talking about narcissists, it's so easy to get sucked into the relationship. And then they switch so slowly and they break you down so slowly that one day you look up and, honestly, Terrain, I promise you, you look up and you have no idea who you are. You don't recognize yourself in the mirror. You don't sound like yourself. You don't have any idea what you think. You are terrified to express an opinion. Everything you say is an attack. And so you're attacked back. And you it's utterly demoralizing and diminishing. And that's why when I said, I can't believe I left, I can't believe I left, because I was at that point where I, there was none of me left at all by the end of it. But I got myself and my son out of it and we started again. And to this minute, sitting here, safe in a peaceful place, you know, I still cannot believe that I did it. I cannot believe I left him. I cannot believe I stuck to my guns, even after he begged and pleaded and cried and went to therapy and all those things I'd been asking him to do. Suddenly he was doing them. And I still said no. Like before, I would threaten to leave him and then he would beg and cry and I would say, okay. But this time, I didn't say okay. This time I kept saying no. And I swear to you, sitting here safe at, 7 o'clock on a Saturday night in England, in a quiet place, I have no idea how I stuck to my guns that time. I honestly cannot tell you. I think you reach the point where it's like you live or die, and I knew that, and I decided I was going to live.
The ego of the narcissist, since we're on that subject, is very fragile. Like you leave
Mm,
them and they're like, how can you leave me? And to see the transformation from this person that came across as so proud, so prideful, so confident, right? And you leave them and they know you're actually going to leave, they
mm.
totally become someone else, right? To the point where they're almost begging. Marysol, don't leave
Oh
me. I
yeah.
promise
Oh
I'll
God, yeah,
change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it was. I'll buy you this. I'll buy you that. They're so fragile. And I think you mentioned this earlier, weak in a sense.
yeah.
And maybe that's why their avatar, like what they put out to the world, is strong, confident, because they know deep down that they're very small, they're very unsuccessful, maybe based on their standards. So what they try
Mm,
to do is they try to manipulate someone to maybe bring them into a world that they always want to belong to. They say, okay, you know what, Marysol, she's educated, she comes from a good family, she's this, I want to do that. So they trap the person that way. And some people may feel bad, like to see the downfall of a narcissist, but I think what a lot of people have to keep in mind is that when they move on to someone very quickly. Whereas
mm,
their victims, they're the ones who take so much more time. And unfortunately, when they do leave and they're in recovery, some may go into another relationship. And now that relationship is impacted because they're like, I don't know if I can trust another man. I don't
mm.
know if I can trust another woman. So as we close, what kind of advice can you give to maybe the men and women who are in recovery because they've escaped the situation, but they want to make sure they're not impacting other people that they may get into relationships with in a negative or unhealthy way?
Well, I think one of the things to realize is when your relationship with a toxic or narcissistic or abusive person ends and they move on immediately and you simply cannot, it is totally, totally normal to feel angry about that and to feel betrayed and to almost have like narcissistic regret where you think, because you see them with the new person, right? Because they're in the love bombing stage with the new person and they look so happy and everything looks so great. And you're thinking to yourself, was it me? Like, did I get it wrong? Should I have stuck it out? Should I have just given him that one last chance because maybe he was capable of changing? What you have to understand about one of the reasons narcissists move on as quickly as they do to new relationships is because they have to prove to the world that they were not the problem in your relationship with them. You were the problem. Because if I was the problem, this is what the narcissist is thinking. The narcissist is thinking, if I was the problem, would I have this great person in love with me 2 weeks? I mean, would no. And this, she's alone and she's a mess and she's in therapy. And I have this awesome new relationship. So come on, world, who's the problem? Who's really the problem? It's not me. It's her, my crazy ex. It's the lunatic ex. So when you're moving on from a narcissistic relationship, it is so, so, so important, if at all possible. Um, do what you have to do to reach the point where you're done with them. Because there's this whole idea like go, no contact and don't look at their social media. It's unrealistic because you're so angry and you're so hurt and you're so confused and you're so busy thinking, why is he giving her everything that I asked him for? What you're forgetting is he's back in the love bombing stage with somebody new. It is really important to understand that he is on his best behavior with somebody new, the way he was on his best behavior with you in the beginning. He has to make her fall in love with him so he can start devaluing her, and the whole mess starts all over again. All you can do is the other thing you do after a narcissistic relationship is you start to, because you're clear of it, you're out of it, you're not in the constant fight or flight or fawn or freeze. You're not sleep deprived. You're not walking on eggshells and emotionally being abused. So you start to get some clarity, and suddenly you're thinking, huh, this thing he said 3 years ago, it doesn't actually add up. So you start to unbraid all of the lies, like the stuff that I have found out about my ex in the past year and a half is shocking. But I needed to know that because then you think to yourself, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm really not crazy. So that's something else I would say to somebody in recovery. You're not crazy. You are just somebody who is hurt and angry. And you're starting to see things now that you suspected before, but you couldn't get the clarity. And now you do. And while you're in that part of the recovery, the whole, he told me he was here. I need to be sure like I know he wasn't there, but I need to prove to myself he wasn't there because I need to know that I'm not a lunatic because he says I'm a lunatic and everybody's saying I'm a lunatic, but I'm not a lunatic. So you go through a slight, I will call it the lunatic phase where you are so busy trying to figure everything out. Like you're trying to get that perspective on your relationship that you couldn't see. When you're at this point, please do not leap into a new relationship. Just please don't. Like you have got to bury the old one. And you can't bury the old one until you have reached your personal point of saying, now I'm done. Like, now I understand what he's doing with the new relationship. Now I know that he hasn't actually changed. I know what a narcissistic cycle looks like. I know he was cheating on me. I'm not insane. I know that when he said those things to me and then he lied and lied and lied and denied it, I wasn't imagining it. It did actually happen. It all happened. I was there. I remember. My memory is not the problem. I'm not crazy. He's not in a perfect new relationship. He's just spinning off to a new victim. Um, and that point is different for every person. I mean, I was probably in that point for about a year after leaving him. And I left him, remember, he didn't leave me. He didn't discard me. I left him. And I was still for a year putting pieces together and being woken up at 2 in the morning going, oh my God, yeah, no, that was a lie. It took me a year to really get to the point where I found out enough about the truth of my relationship with him where I could say, now I'm done. Like now the chapter's closed. Now I'm ready to reclaim and move on. And since finding out what I needed to find out, and since then I can go fully no contact. Then I can stop trying to figure stuff out. And I think this whole idea, oh, just go no contact, just don't think about it. I think it's unrealistic for people who've left narcissistic relationships because you've spent months, if not years, being gaslit into an alternate reality. You cannot go on with your life until you understand the life you were living wasn't the reality you were being told. You have to uncover that reality. And you do that however you have to, however long it takes for you to do that. I fully support abuse victims digging through the wreckage of their old life, not just walking away from it and saying, well, I'll pretend that it never happened. It doesn't work because that's how you drag crap into your new relationship because you haven't faced it, you haven't seen it, you haven't uncovered it. So my advice is take your time. If you have to be angry, be angry. If you have to comb through the lies, uncover them. If you have to figure out if he was cheating on you with who, do that. Like whatever you have to do to get a real, honest grasp of how you are living with that person, you do that. And then you say, that's enough. I know there's more, but that's enough. That's all. That's good. And now I can carry on with reclaiming my life and my independence and my happiness and my sanity and my soul. um, and then you can carry on. And even if you never have a romantic relationship again, at least you know that you are living a life of integrity and honesty because you know who you are. You really do. You figured it out. You were told for so many years you didn't know who you were. You forgot, but now you do. So now you can carry on however you want to do that, and you do that as a full, aware, sane, whole person.